All right, this one we're going to cover page 6 of the real estate purchase contract. So page 6 is where you've got the contract deadlines. So let's talk about how to fill out those contract deadlines. So you'll notice here the first one is seller disclosure deadline, and you'll also notice it has a spot here that says date. The Division of Real Estate would like to see an actual date there. So I don't recommend throwing in so many days after acceptance, anything other than an actual date. Now, there are going to be a few exceptions to that, but they are exceptions. It's not going to be anything that you're going to normally do. So, for example, on a short sale, you probably would write in here, see short sale addendum. But outside of that, pretty rare that you're going to be doing anything other than a date. So, seller disclosure deadline, typically, now remember, the things that have to be delivered by the seller disclosure deadline are back in section 7. So if you need to review that, go back to section 7, because it's more than just seller disclosures, and a lot of times that's all people will send over. So the date on this, I usually say to do somewhere around 3 to 5 days should be sufficient. There may be situations that you want to do 7. A lot of times people will just default and put 7 days, which should be okay. But the important thing to remember is that whatever time frame you give to get seller disclosures, you also want to make sure your due diligence deadline gives the buyer enough time to then evaluate them. So typically, like I say, 5 days-ish is about where I usually would put it. So figuring out what 5 days from the date that I'm writing the offer is, putting that in there. Your due diligence deadline, usually that's going to be 10 to 14, probably more on the error on the side of 14 on that. This is allowing your buyer to do whatever inspections they want to do. So what we want to do on this due diligence deadline is to make sure they have enough time to do any of those inspections they want to do. So find out from them what they're going to do, how long that's going to take to get done. Again, as a general rule, most of the time you're probably going to be okay somewhere around 10 to 14 days. You probably would just want to verify that with a home inspector of how long it's going to take them to get out there and when they can get the report to your client. But typically can be done within 2 weeks. So 14 days-ish is pretty good. Finance and appraisal deadline. Now this deadline again is if the buyer cancels prior to this deadline based on either not qualifying or just not liking the terms of the loan, they get the earnest money back if it's before whatever date you put on this line. If it's after that date, then they cancel. They would not get the earnest money back. So on this one, you want to make sure with the lender, how long are you going to need to get all the finances done, to get the appraisal done and everything. So making sure that you give yourself enough time. Typically somewhere around 3 weeks is good, but I would always verify that with the lender to make sure that they can do that, because just depending on market conditions, things could change and it may take longer than 3 weeks. May be able to be shorter, so just verify with them. Your settlement deadline, this is going to be for when you're actually going to go in and sign all the documents and everything. So this one is going to be somewhat correlated to how quickly can they get the loan done and everything ready to go, and when does the buyer want to be able to move in. So on that, you're typically going to need probably at least 30 days, but you may even need more like 40 or 45 days. So again, I would verify with the lender of what time frame you could put down for a settlement deadline. Now, once you find that out, I usually would say to recommend putting this finance and appraisal deadline really pretty close to your settlement deadline. So if this is going to end up being 40 days, you may even do 30 days up here, or 40 days and 35 days. So, just work with the lender to find out how long is it going to take them to do that, and then when can we actually get everything closed up. Next section is your offer and time for acceptance. This is where the buyer is saying to the seller, here's my offer and here's how long it's good for. So whatever date and time you put in here, or excuse me, time and date that you put in here, is how long this offer is good for. So you want to make sure to give them enough time. So again, I recommend calling and asking the listing agent, telling them, hey, I'm writing an offer and I'm going to be sending it over. How much time are you going to need? So you may want to give them a little more time than what they asked for. So for instance, let's say if they told you they could have an answer for you by 8 o'clock tonight, you may want to give them until 10 in the morning or 10 tonight, something like that. So, I mean, it's up to you how you want to work that. But I really wouldn't give them too much time, because if you gave them 3 days, they may wait the whole 3 days to respond. So I've just found usually calling and saying how much time do you need, and then working it out based on that. From here, then your clients will sign here. You'll print their names down here. Notice address. This is where any notices should be sent to. So I usually would recommend putting the office address, because if they're going to be sending over an addendum or something, we would want it to come here. You may even want to just put your email address. You want it to be sent to your email address there. And then down here is where the seller is either going to check the box to accept, they'll check this one to counter, or if they're rejecting, they would check this, and then the seller signs, prints, and puts their notice address. And then don't forget, a lot of times agents will miss having their client's initial down here in the buyer's initials. I'm not sure why it put check boxes there as I clicked on it, but that's where your clients will actually initial.